Hi, my name is Matthew, and I'll be responding to Antonio's speech, with his major claim being abolishing the Second Amendment on arms and exposes citizens to harm. Therefore, we need to protect the Second Amendment from being repealed. And his secondary claims are: first, guns are the most effective manner of protection against criminals. Second, ownership of guns is effective at preventing burglaries and crimes. And three, repealing the right to bear arms steals away the sense of safety many enjoy. First off, I'm going to talk about his major claim. I don't necessarily see an argument about repealing the Second Amendment. For two reasons. First off, it's extremely unlikely for it to happen. Only 27 amendments have been added to the Constitution, and only one has been repealed, and it's a very difficult process requiring a 2/3 majority vote of both houses in Congress, as well as 3/4 of the states ratifying it before it's enacted. And also there's a lot easier method to get this accomplished through gun control laws, which you can see an argument a little bit in his secondary claims for that stance. Starting off first with his first claim. Guns are the most effective manner of protection against criminals. And in this argument, he used a quote by Dr. Gary Kleck, professor of criminology at Florida State University. And this quote essentially said that there are many types of forms of protection against property loss, but he feels that the gun is the most effective in robberies and burglaries. And he shows that for robberies, it's the most effective, and then for burglaries, it's the second most effective. And it's second most effective behind a non-gun weapon. And so it kind of sets an unclear picture as to really how effective the gun is. And to be truly effective, it would be used across all different crimes as a form of protection. But according to the U.S. Department of Justice, guns are rarely used in self-defense. Only 0.79% of victims of violent crimes and 0.12% of victims of property crimes use a gun to protect themselves in those situations. So I really don't think that it's a very concrete stance to say that guns are the most effective manner of protection against criminals when they're rarely used, and they might not be the most optimal choice in all types of crime situations. Moving on to his second point, ownership of guns is effective at preventing burglaries and crimes. Antonio used the hypothetical situation where Dr. Gary Kleck reports that guns prevent an estimated 2.5 billion crimes a year. But according to the U.S. Department of Justice, in between the years of 2007 and 2011, only combined 300,000 reports have seen guns be used to protect themselves from property crimes and violent crimes. And also, legally owned guns are frequently stolen and used by criminals. According to the Institute of Medicine and National Research Council, almost all guns used in criminal acts enter circulation via initial legal transaction. And also from the U.S. Department of Justice, a yearly average of 232,400 guns were stolen during property crimes in the U.S., and that's every year. And also, according to Ian Ares and John Donahue, professors of law at Yale Law School and Stanford Law School, state that with guns being a product that can be easily carried away and quickly sold at a relatively high fraction of the initial cost, the presence of more guns can actually serve as a stimulus to burglary and theft, even if the gun owner had a permit to carry a concealed weapon and would never use it in the furtherance of a crime. Is it likely to say the same for the criminal who steals the gun? So really, with this evidence here, we can't really say that ownership of a gun prevents burglaries and crimes, but it could actually serve as a stimulus for burglaries and crimes that happen in the area you're in. Then moving on to his third claim, repealing the right to bear arms steals away the sense of safety many enjoy. And he uses some stats from the Pew Foundation that says that 79% of gun owners felt safer owning guns and 70% said they enjoyed it. This is true. I mean, you can feel safe having a gun, but his major claim stated that it should not be abolished for safety reasons, and feeling safe and being safe are completely different. In the New England Journal of Medicine, a study has been done and published there that found that guns kept in the home are associated with an increased risk of homicide by a family member or an immediate acquaintance. And then another study published in the same journal by Dr. Matthew Miller and Dr. David Hemingway in 2005 found that suicide was the second leading cause of death among Americans 40 years or younger, and more than half of those suicide deaths are from gun suicides. And yes, guns are common, but so are drugs and cutting. And drugs and cutting make up 90% of the suicide attempts, but more than half of the deaths are from gun deaths. So only 10% of the attempts make up more than half the percent of the deaths. And then lastly, the FBI found that in 2013, Arguments such as romantic triangles, walls fueled by alcohol or drugs, and arguments over money resulted in gun deaths, with 59.9% of those deaths being from a gun death. So really having a gun around can actually increase your chance of being killed by it. So feeling safe, that may be true, but going back to his major claim of it shouldn't be repealed for safety reasons, having a gun around would actually increase the amount of danger you're in. So in conclusion, his secondary claims didn't really have concrete evidence to support his major claim, and his major claim really didn't have an argument behind it, since there is a much easier method of accomplishing the same goal. Thank you.
All right, I thought that you kind of dismissed the argument about the repealing the Second Amendment pretty effectively and suggested that the alternatives really are the more appropriate thing for us to be focusing on. That was fine. On the argument about the guns being effective, on the first point, you acknowledge the evidence that the advocate presents, and then you've got some contrary evidence that talks about other kinds of crimes, and I thought that that was a good direct response to that point. And one of the things that you might want to do a little bit more of is compare the data that's being presented there, but I thought that you had the right idea there. On the burglary issue, the second point, there's this one statistic that talks about the number of crimes that's prevented, and then there's another one that says, well, it's only reported 300,000 times. So that seems to suggest either that there are large numbers of uses of guns that are used for self-defense that are not reported, or that it's not as significant as it appears to be, and you kind of go with the second one, and I think that you need to have a little bit more reason to believe that one. It was a little confusing to me because you also had a piece of information that talked about how the guns enter into the illegal use through legal processes to begin with, and that sounds to me first like you're suggesting that that this is a problem that's related to people violating the laws, as opposed to that we have a law that prevents this from happening. And I guess your inference there is that that's a potential place where we could put some restrictions and fix that problem. I think it would need to be developed a little bit more for it to be practical. I thought that you had a very good set of counter arguments on the third point, except for the idea that sense of safety being safe itself. I thought that was kind of a weak push on parsing the language there, but when you talk about the data on the point, I thought that you, like I said, built a very good argument to suggest that you actually are less safe as a consequence of ownership of the gun, and you presented some good information on that point. All right, thank you.